Good afternoon. I'm Joseph Morales from the Office of Inclusive Excellence. On behalf of the organizing committee, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to another What Matters to Me and Why at UCI. First, some things you should be aware of. This talk is being recorded and live transcription is available. What Matters to Me and Why provides us with an opportunity to hear from a member of the campus community in a short, informal talk, followed by questions and discussion. There's no prescribed topic. Speakers are asked simply to answer the question, what matters to you and why? The series provides a forum for speakers to talk about values, beliefs, and motivations, and perhaps to share how these have been shaped by personal experience. The hope is to strengthen bonds between students, staff, and faculty who teach, learn, and work here at UCI. As I mentioned at the conclusion, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. At that time, please use the raise hand function. After the event, you should receive a survey. This is an opportunity for you to propose future speakers. Next month, February 10th, we will host Dr. Albert Chang as our next speaker. I also encourage you to check out What Matters to Me and Why UCI Alumni Series, the What Matters to Me and Why UCI Health Series, and Interviews on Diversity, where each speaker is asked to reflect on what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to them. Before we hear from Professor Claire Yu, who will introduce our speaker, we would like to acknowledge support from the Office of the Chancellor and co-sponsorship from Phi Beta Kappa. Also, What Matters to Me and Why has a tradition. Right now, thanks to the magic of Will Alvarez and UCI Media behind the scenes, in the spirit of community, we will move into breakout rooms where you'll have an opportunity to meet other attendees. Please, at that time, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, describe what your role is at UCI, and how you heard of What Matters to Me and Why. Thank you and enjoy the talk.
Well, welcome back. My name is Claire Yu, and I have the pleasure of introducing the speaker for today. Virginia Trimble is one of the most unique and interesting individuals I know, but rather than tell you anecdotes, since she has a number of them that she's going to relate to us, let me just give a quick introduction. Virginia Trimble grew up in Southern California. She was born and raised in Southern California and received her bachelor's in astronomy and physics from UCLA and her PhD in 1968 from Caltech in astronomy. And it's particularly noteworthy that at that time, Caltech did not admit women students except under exceptional circumstances. And she was only the second woman allowed access to Palomar Observatory. She then went on to be an assistant professor of astronomy at Smith College for a year before going to Cambridge in England as a research fellow. She joined the faculty at UCI in the Department of Physics and Astronomy in 1971, and she was the first woman faculty member of that department, my department. Fortunately, there have been other women who have subsequently come, but it's been a while. It took a while. She has received numerous honors and awards, including the National Academy of Science Award for Scientific Reviewing, the Klopstock Memorial Award from the American Association of Physics Teachers, and the George Van Biesbroek Prize for her many years of dedicated service to the national and international communities of astronomers. In 2018, she was elected a patron of the American Astronomical Society, and she has served on an incredibly large number of advisory panels, boards, committees, etc. For this talk, it's worth noting that she is the historian of the Mu California chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, which is co-sponsoring this event. She is incredibly prolific and has published more than 900 articles spanning topics in astrophysics and the history of science. She is particularly famous for her annual review of astronomy and astrophysics research, and often gives summary reviews at astrophysical conferences. So please join me in welcoming Professor Virginia Trimble.
Okay. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what time zone you're in. When my colleagues very bravely invited me to do this, my first thought was I should try to come up with some moral principles. I decided I'm not sure I have moral principles, but I have some policy guidelines. One is to do my fair share of the world's work, and the other is try not to make unnecessary messes. There are necessary messes. We're in one now, we're in many now, and we will work our way through them. But I want to say something about how to learn, how to be grateful, how to share some of my failures, and a bit of advice. I'm going to start with a mess. This is a graduate student, a young man who's just completed the defense of his PhD thesis successfully. And there's a young lady congratulating him. They're clearly friends. They're clearly very good friends. In fact, although he's happily married, he said he's in love with her and she says she quite likes him. And on the far right, looking deliberately the other direction, is the gentleman who was the PhD advisor for both of them. He thought he wanted to marry the young lady. He got over that eventually. And in spite of this obvious mess, which would get all of us fired now, it turned out fairly well, because here is, a few years later, the entire staff of the Mount Wilson and Palomar observatories. On the far right is the young man you saw a minute before. Kind of in the middle of the front row is the thesis advisor for both of us. Notice the gender balance of that staff at the time. And this is the staff at the Institute of Theoretical Astronomy in Cambridge in the same time frame. The third row on the left, you'll see the three young ladies who are the staff secretaries. Front row, the one female on the staff, and 40-some guys. The far left, if you are good at faces, you might actually recognize Steve Hawking. In those days, he could walk and talk. So it all turned out fairly well for all of us. This is how I looked as a graduate student to the distinguished physicist Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize 1965. However, there's another mess. There's Richard Feynman having a hissy fit at a meeting here at UC Irvine. Claire Yu said she recognized the edge of the picture at the top, and she did. It's in Roland Hall. And I'd asked Richard to come give a talk at a memorial conference honoring the first member of our physics faculty who died, John Pelham. I forgot now exactly what he was mad about, but we managed to pacify him and go forward. Fair share of the world's work. That's actually the program from commencement 2018. And there in the little red box is Trimble, being a marshal. By the way, commencement, when you're a cripple on a walker, walking the length of the Bren Event Center is no joke, but it was part of my job. I did it, and I'm not sorry I did. Okay, this goes back something like 60 years. Smith College, Claire mentioned, I was there. I was hired, of course, to teach astronomy, but what the president really wanted me to do was be second sister in the faculty production of Pirates of Penzance, and this I did. In the middle comes being a member of the faculty team, facing the student all-stars in the College Bowl team. Chancellor Cicerone was part of that team. He was very, very good at it. We've had other chancellors who were not quite so good at it. They framed a question actually for Michael Drake. What is the smallest bone in the human body? He pressed his buzzer and he says, you know, I've forgotten. Before this, we had a team that included an assistant professor of biology, was incredibly good at his own subject, and also, in fact, knew all about spectator and participant sports. And we slaughtered the students that year. He left us for Arizona the next year. The first, and I suspect to this day, maybe the only Black professor of biology that we've had here, certainly the first. But Cicerone wanted us to win by just a little bit, and that we managed to do. 4 embarrassing failures. How to make a pulley work. I could not understand. I finally learned. Driving a stick shift car. I was left at age 23. With a stick shift car, I couldn't drive in the middle of nowhere. I did what a red-blooded, brave American woman does under these circumstances. I phoned my father. He came and rescued me. I pledged Alpha Omicron Pi as an undergraduate and failed that too. My mother really wanted me to be a sorority girl. She'd wanted to go to college and didn't make it. Her parents wouldn't pay for a girl. They would have paid for her brother. But I flunked sorority, a lot of reasons, but I don't recognize faces. I love Claire because she's the only member of the department I never fail to recognize. And I've had 4 failures trying to learn to ice skate over many years. There's our Girl Scout ice skating team. I'm not on it. Some of my friends, I'm still friends with some of these people. We get together for dinners when we can. And it wasn't exactly weak ankles. That wasn't the problem. Ways of learning. You can watch, you can try, you can listen, you can read. I happen to be fairly good at reading. It said you need 10,000 hours to master something. That's praise of busy work. Feynman said a physicist could learn to do anything that anyone else could do. It's probably true, but you need time. You need to play all the Chopin etudes, swim all 10 strokes in the Red Cross manual, bake all of Julia Child's cakes, read all of Shaw's plays or all of Shakespeare's, sink all the baskets, and there has to be motivation. You cannot do everything in one lifetime. We've got to trust. We've got to trust people we've never even seen. You pull into a gas station, you have to be pretty sure that the fluid is going to be octane and not pancake syrup. And there's no such thing as wasted knowledge. It was knowing Gilbert and Sullivan that got me that Smith College job. And it was being able to read and write Egyptian hieroglyphs that got me the fellowship for graduate school with Woodrow Wilson. Notice my handwriting in Egyptian is very much better than my handwriting in English. This was individual instruction. There were 3 of us in the class. And there's Professor Miriam Mishtime teaching me the meaning of the Wen bunny. The Wen bunny is a very firm negative. There is not. Egyptian is a Semitic language. You can recognize its cognates in Hebrew. The Sejm F is he hears in Egyptian, and Shema is to hear in Hebrew. But Miriam taught me, for better or for worse, Egyptian. I tell you, it's not wasted. It's been useful to me on various occasions. I also took a year of Egyptian art and architecture, and that's what I looked like to the professor who also he thought he wanted to marry me at the time. The eyes are too big, so that's how they do Egyptian Coptic tomb portraits. This is very slow going forward. This is family. Upper left-hand corner. I was raised in a really nice house. Mother and father beneath it. A family dinner in the upper right-hand corner. My mother and her mother in the middle there. Lower right-hand corner, me and my mother. Mother had the gift of tongues, which I do not. She was fluent in Spanish and French. My father was a chemist, a very good chemist, but not a very good businessman, which was why my ability to earn a living early turned out to be important. The lower left corner is my grandmother. And in the background is a piano, which I still have, and a painting, which is a forgery of a Thomas Moran, which I still have. My grandmother used to give me some money occasionally. She would say, if you want something, get it now, because when you're my age, you won't want anything. I'm now older than Graham was at the time. I still want things, mostly books and CDs and stuff. But, you know, she lived to be 98, a very wise woman. I miss her still. This is when I became a sellable commodity. What did I do with it? Things in magazines. Oh, okay. I grew up in a bookish house. There were chemistry books in the background. Being active was okay. Being weird was okay. It's very slow going forward. That's my childhood bedroom. And what did I do with this? Sensible solutions to the 2 career problem. I met and married Yona Ben Yaakov, Joseph Weber. We married after 3 weekends together. We felt our friends deserved some food and drink. I discovered the Jews eat and goyim drink. But we first married in the county courthouse in Montgomery County, Maryland. There we are. And second, I think the next one, oh, that's the wedding photograph from our first marriage, taken by his youngest son, who was learning to do color photography. That is not a marriage license, it's a contract, a ketubah. The left side is English. The guy has to agree to a lot more than the gal does. The right side is Hebrew, has his name, Yona Ben Yaakov, and mine, Rachel Abraham Avinu. If there's time, I've got a funny story that goes with that, but I probably won't have time for it. I chose a good name, it turns out. At the bottom are the witnesses, the men, of course, and one of Joe's former graduate students was one of his witnesses. Some wedding photographs, cutting the cake. Lower right-hand corner, me and one of my bridesmaids on the either side of my father. Father is grinning because he realizes next time I'm stuck in a car I can't drive, I'll call my husband and not him. The 2 upper right-hand corner pictures are the 2 officiants, the 2 cantors who performed the service for us. One born in 1910, the other about 1930, both long gone, I'm afraid. Lower left-hand corner, me and my cousin bridesmaid. That's my favorite picture of my husband. He developed the first detectors for gravitational waves. And there he is with one of the detectors, not one of the ones that won the race. Others won the race. But they admitted if he hadn't started the field, it wouldn't have happened at all. Here we are. Other ways of earning a living. I became a saleable commodity, magazines, modeling earrings. I'm wearing actually earrings from the same manufacturer that made those. And these now have got to be 70 years old because he died a long, long time ago. Modeling earrings earned money. You pay attention in class. That's UCLA undergraduate. The instructor is David Isaiah Paul, who I believe is still alive. And he retired from MIT just like a year and a half ago. So you pay attention. Oh, there we are. That's Rod Serling, the creator of the television series called Twilight Zone. I was Miss Twilight Zone for a year. I went to all the cities that did Nielsen ratings: Houston, Dallas, Chicago, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, New York, Washington, Washington, Frisco, and LA. Okay. We're looking at a script there because my job supposedly was to read the scripts for accuracy, for scientific correctness for the science fiction program. Actually, they paid a little bit of attention to me. The picture was also posed because I was taller than Rod Serling. They had to put him on a step and me down below, but it worked out. Pay attention. Oh, where are all these women all of a sudden? That's the alto section of the a cappella choir of UCLA. We were all volunteering for something. And of course, I'm the one who raised the left hand instead of the right. I think we were volunteering for a tour, actually. Pay attention in class. That's Caltech. It was a German class. Again, all guys. And a hairstyle that I still use. Not everybody likes it, but I do. There I am demonstrating a telescope for an EPO, an education public outreach type event. That's at Caltech, and the telescope is a 10% model of the 200-inch at Palomar. This was given back to Corning Glass some years ago, and I've used it both in California and in New York. You do a thesis. That's me measuring the motion and structure of the filamentary envelope of the Crab Nebula for my thesis. Nothing in the world sounds sillier than the title of a PhD dissertation in somebody else's field, but it got me a Caltech PhD. And I got to be a role model. The lower right-hand corner is Nancy Grace Roman. They've just named a telescope for her. Lower left is me. Upper right, that's Melba Roy. Don't let anybody ever tell you that Katherine Johnson was the only Black woman in the space program in the 60s. There were others, and they were very good at what they did. Oh, you write papers. You can't read that. I can't read it myself. But my first paper was actually in Egyptology. So that's my first 20 papers. And then what do? You teach, which means reading and writing and arithmetic, burning the midnight oil to correct papers, and to get education public outreach. That's a car. It was my car. It's a Chevy Camaro bought used. And the license plate says Tau X1, which meant the X-ray source in the Crab Nebula. People would ask what my license plate meant. I could then explain to them about supernovae and the expansion of the universe and other fun things. It's a standard elevator talk. You have 50 seconds to tell somebody why what you do is really neat. And the license plate helps. I have another car now, but it doesn't have a neat license plate. You serve on committees. There I was part of the organizing committee for this conference. I was also one of the speakers. I was the token female on the organizing committee. There were 2 other women among the speakers. I think this is now called conflict of interest if you're both the organizing committee and a speaker, but at the time it was doing your work. You write a book, visit to a small universe. You serve on committees. The 3 gentlemen in this picture, all wonderful guys, all became president of the International Astronomical Union. And there's Virginia, who topped out at vice president. I've reached my level of incompetence at vice president of an enormous number of scientific organizations. But there we all were, the 3 guys who became president and the girl who didn't. And you write some more papers. That doesn't take to 900, that only goes to about 700. That was the page I had. You learn to accept with gratitude. I got a lot of prizes when I graduated from high school. My mother learned to take pictures just so to record this. Mother was not the photographer, father was the photographer, but mother learned to take pictures to record all the prizes I got. Several colleagues sent me nice bouquets of flowers for my 60th birthday. I was at the University of Maryland at the time. The bouquet on the right actually has 60 red roses. You get to be made a fellow of this, that, and the other. Sigma Xi, the Scientific Research Honor Society, it's the scientific equivalent of Phi Beta Kappa, really, appointed its first fellows ever this year. 25 of us. I'm actually the only one from UC of any campus and the only astronomer. And some friends organized a really nice party in my honor in the summer of 2018. The guy just to my right in 2 of the 3 pictures is the love of my life forever. He's now a member of the House of Lords in England, Lord Rees of Ludlow. The guy in the upper left did most of the photography, so he's only in a few of the pictures. The 2 women on either side, Jennifer Rittenhouse and Stella Kafka, who's president of the American Association of Variable Star Observers, another fun organization. Briefly, we go to history and politics. The Economist, a British journal, makes fun of American politics whenever they can and pointed out that Congress had last done something in 1842. That's not infinitely long ago. The picture is my mother standing by the grave of her grandparents. She was wearing a black dress and she hated black, so that was her doing her fair share of the world's work. But her grandparents were born in 1838 and 1845 on either side of that congressional action of 1842. That's my mother as a young girl, and she was 9 when that picture was taken. And the parents came from, her grandparents came from Denmark. Her grandfather never learned English. Men, I spent most of my life among men. Lower left-hand corner is my thesis advisor. Lower right-hand corner was that guy I was congratulating. Just above him was my high school sweetheart. Feynman is in the middle, of course, because he always was in the middle. There are a couple of other co-authors there. The far left, that's not left. It looks like an aging Viennese psychiatrist. He was actually an aging Viennese physicist. Upper left-hand corner, the guy who persuaded me when I wear my hair in pigtails, I should always use 2 different colored bands on the 2 different sides. Last man who ever asked me to marry him. And I think the first is somewhere in there. And down at the bottom in the center is the first composer, the only composer who ever thought I was a soprano and wrote his music accordingly so I could sing it. Last thoughts. If you're asked to do something and you can see immediately how to do it, just say yes. So here I am with thanks to everybody. Otherwise, seek further information. Can you do the hula for us? When? Week from Tuesday? Yes. If you're given a choice of 2 tasks, pick the one you don't already know how to do. And pay attention to what's going on around you, because someday you'll be the only one who remembers. Thank you very much. Hi, Claire.
Hi, thank you very much, Virginia. So if there are people who have questions
Or comments or rude remarks,
please raise your hand. There's a raise hand function if you click on participants, I think at the
it's usually at the bottom, yeah, bottom left, I think.
Participants invite, mute me. Let's see here. Okay, I'm not seeing. Do we have the?
Nobody wants to hear any more from me, and I don't blame them.
I have my hand up.
All right, Anna Marie, is that you?
The story
Yeah,
that you
go ahead,
didn't think
please.
you had time. The story you didn't think you had time for about your name.
Oh, yeah, this is a good
Oh,
one.
yeah.
My husband was considerably older than me, I think it's obvious. His first eldest granddaughter became bat mitzvah in 1986, I think. And she had her hair done just before the event. It was a mistake because it didn't dry out. And so her curls were all hanging horribly on one side. And we were in some room before the event. And she was crying because she didn't look pretty enough. And I said, "Don't cry, Rachel. You're the most beautiful Rachel in the whole room." And she says, "I'm the only Rachel in the whole room." And I said, "No, you're not. My name is Rachel too, and I'm very beautiful." And she got laughing so hard she forgot about her curls.
Very good. I think
I've got stories about every person in those pictures, but
Hi, Virginia. I have a question for you. It's
Yes.
Rebecca.
hi. Oh,
what do
you've taught for me, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And you know I don't recognize you, so you always tell me who you are.
I know. I
Isn't
always.
it wonderful? Okay, go ahead.
You also recognize voices sometimes, but
I'm good.
what
I'm pretty
do
good at voices.
what do you consider your greatest non-professional accomplishment?
Okay. I don't know whether this is professional or not. My husband was truly a great, great physicist. He was also declared to be a crank by the community from about 1975 on. And we had a very, very wonderfully happy marriage for the next 25 years. I think that was more to his credit than mine. People thought he was crazy to marry me because I'd already had all these men in my life, some of whose pictures you've seen, and some you haven't even seen all the men who asked me to marry them, or thought I should, or anyway, never mind. But we were really very, very happy and had a wonderful time. Immediately after breakfast, we always had the after breakfast hug. We had routines like, have I told you I love you this morning? No, I love you this morning. Have I told you I love you this afternoon? Yes, but I'm always glad to hear it again. I don't know whether that was an achievement or whether it was non-science or whether it was his or mine, but it was certainly the happiest part of my life. My first 28 years, I was looked after by my mother. The next 28 years, I was looked after by my husband. I've now been on my own for 21 years. I miss my Weber and I miss my mother.
Thank you. There's also a question from Catherine. I don't know if you want me to read this or if you want to ask it yourself, Catherine. But she says, I'm very impressed by your courage in pursuing your academic career and always appreciate your presence at the Phi Beta Kappa graduation. So she's asking, could you speak a little bit about Phi Beta Kappa and what you have found rewarding or frustrating about being part of that at UCI?
I don't think I frustrate. I'm fairly Aspergerish and I don't really feel things, either physical or mental, the way normal people do. I was elected from UCLA when they only elected about 10 each year and never from the sciences. And it was my ancient Egyptian that got me elected, I think, to Phi Beta Kappa. We now at UCI elect people from every major we have, even I think engineering, and even now studio art and things that used to be regarded as trade rather than liberal arts. I think that's good. I think you can be excellent in any field. I'm glad we elect people from all fields. What's frustrating? We're not famous. We have to tell the students who we are. And Jonathan Feng, who's going to be the next president of our chapter, I think, has had a bunch of ideas about how we might do a better job of calling attention to our chapter. And I will try to help out if I can, try to do my fair share of the work there too.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Is it possible to see her first slide?
Which one, who?
The first slide. We wanted to see your first slide.
I think the knowledgeable person over there has to do that, yes. That's my name in hieroglyphs, of course. And a few extra titles. I'm Professor 8. That's a miracle. I was stuck at Professor 3. This only makes sense to UCI faculty. I was stuck at Professor 3 for 8 or 9 years. I believe that's a department record. It may be an entire campus record. But I finally made it to Professor 8. I do not aspire to be a Professor 9. I only aspire to be declared not incompetent for another 5 years. I've got to do that coming up pretty soon. We aren't allowed to become incompetent and keep our jobs. But that is my name written in hieroglyphs, if that was what you were asking.
It was whatever you want to say is what I was asking. So that's perfect. Thank you. It's
let's see. Had you heard of Phi Beta Kappa before your invitation and induction into Phi Beta Kappa?
Yes.
Can you
look? This was 1964. Phi Beta Kappa was famous in those days. So was Sigma Xi. My father and my husband as well. My father was a Sigma Xi member. And he was elected as an undergraduate. And when I was elected from Smith College, Father said, "Aren't you kind of old for that?"
Let's see.
But I was elected a full member, not just an associate.
So
yes, I'd heard of both of them when I was an undergraduate.
So the rest of that question is, can you talk about how Phi Beta Kappa was founded in 1974 here at UCI and your role in that?
I was not involved except to sign a piece of paper saying, yes, I'm a member and I'll be happy to be part of our chapter. The process of establishing a new chapter is fairly complicated and somebody must have done the work. It wasn't me. I have, however, been at their triennial meetings occasionally when they vote on whether a new chapter shall be admitted or not. And you have to have a certain minimum number of faculty members who are themselves Phi Beta Kappa. in order to establish a chapter. And they have to come from a range of disciplines. When we first got going, quite a few of the members were from physics, because there'd been a period when physics was regarded as a liberal art, I think. They're all now, I think, emeriti.
I see.
Except me, I'm now the oldest member of the department, still on full active duty.
So those questions were from Rose Jones. We also have a
But, yes.
question from our former dean, Ken Janda, and he's
Hi, Ken.
he's asking, do you have a guess what dark matter is?
I will tell you what I always tell people who know less than you do, and very, very many people who know a hell of a lot less than Ken Janda, I can assure you.
Maybe you could tell us what dark matter.
I will tell you what it is. It is a shorthand word that summarizes an enormous number of observations that indicate gravity is stronger than you expect it to be. And the larger the length scale you look at, the stronger it gets. And that goes from things locally, just stars around us, to our whole Milky Way galaxy, up to the pair of galaxies we belong to groups, to clusters, and to the whole universe. And the longer the scale you look at, the stronger gravity seems to be. There are alternatives to general relativity that claim to do this. They don't work. What does work, and nobody's found anything else that does, is to say that there's a lot of stuff out there that does not emit or absorb light or radiation of any kind. It doesn't do nuclear reactions. It may not even do the weak interaction that makes radioactivity. It just does gravity. So it consists of weakly interacting massive particles, or something even more exotic, something that does gravity and none of the other forces. And there's a lot of it, and it's much more uniformly distributed through the universe than is the stuff we can see, the stuff that's made of the chemical elements that our friends over in the chemistry department study, which, however, of course, can all be reduced to quantum mechanics. Chemistry is all just quantum mechanics, right, Ken? But I still think the phrase is a shorthand for all those observations.
Do you ever, let's see, I think this is from Anne Marie, but do you ever think about how your career might have been different if not for gender, or is that even possible to do?
Sure, because I had a lot of guys who were friends. I think I ended up with exactly what I deserve. I made a stupid mistake when I was an assistant professor here, but graduate program at Caltech had a lot of graduate students then. The best of them undoubtedly was Jim Gunn, who's now professor emeritus at Princeton. There were some who were maybe not quite as hardworking, or not quite as prepared, or not quite as mathematically inclined as I, and they got jobs somewhat less good than UC Irvine. I think I've ended up exactly where I belong. And I found that being female was an advantage because I could get to know anybody I wanted to. They didn't forget me. Nobody expected there to be more than one dark-haired female astronomer in the entire world. When there were two, somebody got confused and thought I was her, but I was never Beatrice Tinsley. She was better than me too, and she, toward the end of her career, she finally had a better job at Yale. But no, I can't imagine being a guy like the gal in Flower Drum Song. I enjoy being a girl. Look at all those lovely men.
So do you think you were at a disadvantage for being a woman?
No, I think I got pretty much exactly where I belong. I made a stupid mistake. My very first year here, I got a Sloan Fellowship. And the astronomy program at NSF was run by somebody I knew. And he asked me how much money he should save for me. And I said I didn't need any because I had the Sloan. That meant I never quite got into the NSF system. I've never brought in my fair share of money to UC Irvine. It must be said they spent my Sloan money out from under me, so I didn't really want to bring any more. So when I had grants, I processed them through the University of Maryland. I spent half of each year there for 29 years.
So then what would you say to us? What would you say to those about money, being female, being exactly where you are, and being happy about it? You don't want to, how do I ask this? Are you happy to be still active? Do you feel like you have to stay there?
I'm a childless widow with no siblings. I have no human responsibilities in the world. My closest relatives are one first cousin and a couple of cousins once removed. I enjoy what I do. I think I'm still earning my fair share.
Yes.
I think I'm still doing my fair share of the world's work and earning my keep. if I'm not, they'll tell me next year because I've got to go through the 5-year review process.
When,
But I like what I do.
yeah.
I'm not very good at these electronic devices, and I failed miserably to get. I was scheduled. I gave a talk Monday at the American Astronomical Society, and I actually failed to get into the Zoom session. I finally had to beg somebody to let me in by telephone to be unmuted on the phone so I could give my talk. Luckily, all the visuals were there, and somebody else clicked through them for me, so it all turned out okay. But it wasn't the way we'd planned it.
Well, I think I've got to say, for me, you're doing far better than I'm doing at this. I think you're just perfect at it. And I would wonder when you get your fair share of the world's rest.
I go to bed early. Actually, that's true. I was brought up in a family that you know you get your breakfast at 5:30 and you're in bed by 9, and I still do that. So I get as much daylight as there is to be had this time of year. I'm a morning person. There's no doubt about that. My grandmother was a morning person. My mother and father were morning persons. Luckily, you know, I married Joe when we'd known each other for small portions of 3 weekends. And it turned out he was a morning person and a hard worker too. I didn't know that when I married him. So I was just really very lucky. You know, the most important choices you make in your entire life are your choice of parents and your choice of spouse. And I was just really very lucky with both.
Thank you.
Hey, Virginia, it's Rebecca again. I have a question along a bit of a different line. I know that you are very well read in history. For, I guess, a lot of the people on the call, they won't know the extent of your knowledge of history of physics and of the world. But at the very beginning of your talk, you mentioned that, you know, we're going through some messes right now with the current political climate, but that we'll work through them. I'd be really interested to hear your kind of perspective from all the history that you know about messes and how we've worked through that in the past and how you see that coming to fruition today.
So far, every empire we know about except ours has fallen. Starting with the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and you know what caused that. Or maybe you don't. And actually, I don't know this audience well enough to be sure that I can get away with making non-political correct. I won't. Anyway, the Aztecs fell. They didn't deserve it. Egypt fell. Babylonians fell. We will not go on forever. Do I think we will recover from the particular political mess? Yes, probably. But you notice I also had connected with the messes, trying to do a better job of diversity, inclusion, equity. And I think we're going to have chaos there before we have more equality. Yeah, I think the US has one more chance at becoming a surviving empire one more time, but it won't go on forever. I don't know who's coming next. China, I suppose. And I'm grateful that there's an active astronomical community in China. Unfortunately, like everything else, all the people I knew there well are now dead. But I'm grateful there's an astronomical community in China. They have 2 of the world's biggest telescopes now.
What do you think is the secret to success? Your success, or if you were giving, there are a lot of young people listening to us, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it was on that last slide. Do the more difficult task, which I didn't always, I should have. Do your fair share of the world's work. If you can be born of really good parents and choose a really good spouse, that's great. And if you don't have that startup, I don't know what the answer is. I think I would have done very badly. I mean, when I was a kid, the folks were doing the dishes. I'd stand in the kitchen floor, twirling and flapping my arms up and down, saying, phantom, phantom, phantom. This is a well-known mark of autism. They simply ignored me. If they tried to cure this, it would have been an absolute disaster. If Mrs. McCabe had tried to teach me decent handwriting, it would have been an absolute disaster. She said, buy her a typewriter. That works fine. I suspect with a less good start, I don't know what would have happened, but probably not very happy.
Were you ever afraid of failing?
No.
Were afraid to do something because you were afraid of failure?
No, I mean, I only applied to 1 undergraduate institution and 1 graduate school. And when I was on the market for jobs, you didn't apply in those days. You waited to be offered. And when I got my PhD, I had 5 good offers, one from the CIA. They didn't understand. You know, I'm hopeless about secrets. Tell me something I want to tell the world immediately. I would have been hopeless with the CIA. My husband and my father both had clearances and dealt with them very, very well. I could not have. Where were we? Oh, failures. When I was on the job market, I was offered things, like 5 when I got my PhD. And when I came back from England, I was offered a bunch of jobs again. Do we have time for one more story?
Absolutely.
Okay. When I came back from England, I needed a car, of course. The man across the street from my parents' house ran a Cadillac agency in Glendale called Modern Motors. So the car was going to come from there. And he'd picked out a nice one for me, the one that had that Tau X1 license plate when I got it fixed up. And I was dropped off at the Cadillac agency to pick up my car. Women in those days didn't buy their own cars typically. And fairly young, lower class women did not wander around Cadillac agencies. And the other customers and the salesman all just looked, what are you doing here? What are you? And the boss wasn't obviously there. Up came a man I recognized. Tommy. And he said, Jin, what do you want? Tommy was black. So in one of my really bad moments, I was rescued by a man I could recognize and recognized me. He was, of course, the only black at the agency among either the salesman or the customers. He'd worked for Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, if you know who they were. Worked with them.
So let's see. Rose Jones is asking, could you describe the extent to which the pressure to have children was present in your life? And do you feel that not having children contributed significantly to your ability to succeed as a female academic?
I don't know about the second half. I will tell you what my husband said when we first got married. Again, you know, we had not talked about anything, but he said, if I wanted children, I could have as many as I wanted. He would provide the 2 essentials, sperm and a positive balance in the checking account. And I had suspected all along that 0 would be a good choice. I think I would have been a very bad mother. I mean, I had turtles when I was a graduate student. I worried about the turtles quite a lot. They did well, they all grew. And I now am the sole support of a feral bunny. And I've had to learn to use Amazon to buy food for my bunny.
Mabanu Aranzamini asks, how did you get into being a jewelry model?
One of the guys I was dating, whose picture was in that montage, worked at Hughes Malibu, and his boss was a German immigrant named Samuel Lutz. Sam had a secretary that he brought presents to. He forgot to bring a present from a meeting he'd been at, so he made her earrings by taking pencils and removing the lead and putting little thin milled screws in so she could screw the earring from either side to be a pencil through her ear. She liked it. So 2 things happened. One, his wife died and he married his secretary, but also he started making earrings under the title Mr. Rings. And they were for sale in Beverly Hills and, you know, Honolulu and expensive places. So he was looking for models. And when he saw me as Joe Weber's, really brilliant Virginia, Joe Bear's girlfriend, he said, this is a model I want. So he offered me a job as his model for earrings. And again, you know, I'm wearing some of his from long ago.
Can you, let's see, Hope Michelson asks, can you talk about your relationship to music?
Compulsory, I think, is the, oh, that was a fair share of the world's work that was actually on the slide and I forgot to mention it. Junior high school, I went to LeConte because I wouldn't have to take something, I could take something else, but I was in the mixed glee club because the director said I should be. And I learned to read music, not a problem. My mother taught me enough piano, I could read that. But the director of the junior high school mixed glee club said, many religious people need music to worship properly. If you can sing, you have a job to do. You must be in a church choir to help others worship. I've done Catholic and Protestant and Russian Orthodox choirs, but most of my singing has actually been with synagogue choirs, 2 in California and 2 on the East Coast. And the conductor at the bottom of my montage, the composer, was the one at Washington Hebrew who thought I should be a soprano, so he arranged for me to be a soprano. I'd sung alto all my life. Well, I sang tenor one year with the University of Maryland chorus. I just always felt it was part of my job to do that. I can play the piano well enough to be an emergency accompanist if your choir accompanist doesn't show up. I've taught physics of music because I play 16 instruments all badly. Professor Tucker's done it, and she plays a couple of instruments very well. But I play 16 instruments all badly. I should have brought my song flute or my ukulele or something.
Well, speaking of Professor Tucker, she has a question for you, and we may
Hi,
shorten
Laura.
down this to give people a chance to leave, but do you have specific memories about what sparked your interest in science as a child?
I don't think I was more interested in science than in anything else. It was understood from the get-go that I would go to college, to graduate school. Mother was even willing to dip into her savings to pay for a year of graduate school if necessary. It wasn't needed, of course, I was paid for. But I was interested in practically everything. My first choice career would have been Egyptology, but UCLA didn't actually have an archaeology major. You were supposed to do 4 years of anthropology, which at the time under Professor Clement Meehan, long gone, may he rest in peace. Sorry, may he rest in peace. It meant 4 years of the marriage customs of the Yangna Indians. I was just not prepared to do that. And my father looked in the catalog, and art was clearly hopeless. But there was an astronomy math major that looked promising because I wouldn't have to dissect a frog. I wouldn't have minded dissecting a frog. My father didn't want to dissect a frog, didn't want me to do it. So I signed in for the astronomy mathematics major and moved over to astronomy physics when the math major went into engineering to do satellite orbits, mostly for NASA. But I think I would have been equally happy, and I would hope moderately successful in linguistics or history or a variety of other things. I don't have the gift of tongues, but I'm pretty good at decoding. So that I took a year of linguistics and figured out the grammar of Hungarian from examples. Hungarian has a dual. There's a singular for one person, there's a multiple plural, and there's a third form of the verbs and the pronouns for exactly two people. Clearly they were supposed to marry and stay married.
I see.
If there's anybody out there who speaks Hungarian, I apologize.
So I think we're sort of getting towards the end of time. I don't know if I'm allowed to
It's
go.
12:54, so anybody who has to do something at 1 should dash madly.
Yeah, if anyone needs to leave, I mean, we can keep going with questions. If anyone needs to leave, we should give them the chance to do so. Let me just say one thing before people leave, and that is to remind everyone to please join us on Wednesday, February 10th, next month, when Dr. Albert Chang will be speaking about what matters to him and why. Dr. Chang is the director of the UCI Student Health Center and has
You
been—
must have a hell of a busy time at the moment.
Yes, he has been, in case you haven't noticed, instrumental in formulating UCI's response to the COVID academic. So I think that's going to be a very interesting talk, and I hope everyone will be able to join us for that. And so people who need to leave can leave, and if you can stay around, we'll still have time for a few more questions, perhaps. I see there are more questions in the chat, and so let me thank Virginia again, and let's just keep going with the questions. There's one question, I think, I'm not sure it's typed correctly, but Melissa Falkenstein said, what is a necessary mess towards a more sustainable world? I don't.
We cannot, no, I mean, it's exactly what it means. We cannot continue using resources the way we are using them, or not just the United States, but the whole world will collapse. When I was quite young, probably junior high school, I think I figured out what it would take for every living human being to live as Americans did then and now, and to leave half the earth for other creatures. And I decided that the sustainable population was 10 to the 8, not 10 to the 10, 10 to the 8. I still think that's true. And other people writing in Reason Enough to Hope is one book, and Can We Survive Surviving 1,000 Centuries is another, have said something rather similar. The world's population is going to have to come down a lot. Panic. Epidemics don't do it. Epidemics simply don't kill enough people. And wars don't either. We're going to have to do it deliberately. In the meantime, we'll have to switch to more sustainable fuels and more sustainable agriculture and so forth, or make a nasty mess, and make a different kind of nasty mess in agreeing to do these things and bringing along with us the people who don't want to. I don't know how that's to be done. I think I'm glad I'm 77. It's not going to be my job. I'm pretty good about simple things. I live very close to my office, and I really, even before the panic, I didn't do any extra driving. I did a lot of flying though for conferences. I try to be reasonably good about food and saving leftover scraps for the money and stuff like that.
Roy Petit Ferrer has asked, how has living in London or outside the United States influenced your life?
Actually, I lived in Cambridge, not in London. I was not very good at being a fellow of a Cambridge college. I was a fellow for 1 year of Newnham, 1 year at Girton. I basically flunked napkin rings. I had not gone through the system as an undergraduate. I believe I was actually literally the first foreign fellow that Girton had ever had who didn't actually know how to live in college. And I did a very bad job of it. I made some wonderful friends in the community of astronomers. I made a good friend among the support staff at the Institute, a lovely gal named Sandy Miller. She was Sandy Smith now, she's Sandy Miller now. She's in Paris, and we always exchange birthday and Christmas greetings and things. I did not do a good job of that. I learned to drive a stick shift car of necessity while I was in England. Oh, the secret is if the engine's about to die, you give it more gas, not less. If I'd known that at age 23, I would not have embarrassed myself quite so badly. I learned that different cultures care about different things and learn to eat different things. I sang with choirs there too. I sang with one of the college choirs, and I sang with a group called the Grantis Singers, which did madrigals on the river and stuff like that. And it was, oh, yeah, we had a choral arrangement of the Owl and the Pussycat, went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat, and I and another woman did the parts of the Owl and the Pussycat. It was quite fun. But I wouldn't want to live there now. It gets too cold.
So let's see, there's, I guess, one more question, and that's from, again, Rose Jones. She says, as a historian for UCI Phi Beta Kappa, you talk about firsts, such as when the first African-American member was inducted, when the first female, but say that you are still researching the first Jewish member. Have you gotten close to answering the who, when, and where of that first?
No, I've failed. I've got the first Chinese, the first Japanese, the first Black American, who the second one actually was a physicist. I have not succeeded in finding the first Latino elected to Phi Beta Kappa, the first Jew, or the first Muslim. These have to be individual human beings, and they were probably not all that long ago, but it's not a record that Phi Beta Kappa keeps. They keep the ones I know about you can find from the Phi Beta Kappa materials themselves.
I see.
But the others, if you try Googling Phi Beta Kappa and Jew, you will get I can say they're Alpha of Massachusetts. I don't have to tell you which college that is. Alpha of Massachusetts had a nasty mess in the 30s because so many of the members they were electing were Jewish. And so they established a quota.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you very
You
much.
get if you ask for Phi Beta Kappa plus Jewish.
I think we've gotten a number of very good comments, and people have really felt this was a real treat, and want to thank you very much for taking the time to tell us about what matters to you and why, and for this wonderful talk. And so please join me in thanking Virginia again for a great talk. And
Muchas gracias, Efkaristo, which is Greek, Tananvaga, which is Estonian, Mille grazie, which is Italian, Dankeschön, which is German. What did I leave out? Merci beaucoup, which is French.